Hello, it's the Great Canadian Bagel here, coming to you with the next update of the Canadian federal election prediction series. So, there's been a bunch of polls that came out this week, and a couple polls that didn't come out this week that I just forgot to enter for the previous weeks, which is a couple nanos polls that I forgot to include, which are now included. And as you can quickly see at a glance here, Alberta and Saskatchewan are no longer in the 60% plus column. They've been technically slightly below, but now like the 59 range, which I think is being underrepresented, but there was a big shift in both those regions in the last couple polls, so now they're like 3 or 4% down, and I don't think they're being underpulled by that much, especially right now, because in those regions, the people who've gained haven't necessarily been the Liberals or the NDP. It's been Bloc and other, or sorry, not Bloc, People's Party and other. So I'm more willing to put these two provinces down into the 50 to 60 column now, whereas before I was keeping them 60 column, even though they were being pulled under that, because I think, again, as I said, they're being underpulled. I don't think they're being underpulled now, because I think the Conservatives did genuinely lose the right wing of the party to the People's Party and to Wexit Party, which would affect these two provinces in particular. Wexit Party obviously only really being a thing in these two provinces, and People's Party being relatively strong in these two provinces, though it's not the strongest, as you'll see in a minute. I think New Brunswick is the strongest People's Party by my projection. So, you might ask, why is this? Why has the Conservatives lost a bunch of ground to People's Party and other, or in this case, Wexit? And I think that really all comes down to one single action that happened. Aaron O'Toole of the Conservative Party kicked out Derek Sloan. Technically, the caucus did, but Aaron O'Toole instigated it. So, this pissed off the right wing of the Conservative Party because Derek Sloan was basically one of the stronger social conservative voices, and as anyone who's familiar with this and probably watching this video, ran the leadership race in the spring, and he's outperformed what people were expecting to get. He got like 15%, people were expecting to get like 10% of the vote. So he had a lot of sway with a decent amount of the voter base. I'm not going to say he was the most popular politician in the party, but getting 15% of the vote in a leadership race means you have a lot of clout, and he was basically kicked out over, I'll be honest, a dumb reason. He got fired because some random person that no one's ever heard of who has ties to white supremacy joined the Conservative Party, gave him a donation, and it wasn't rejected, even though the Conservative Party handled the donations. It's a dumb reason. If Sloan's at fault, or the entire Conservative Party's at fault there, and that's just not a good look. I prefer to think neither of them are at fault there, but what can you do? That is a choice O'Toole made, and he's lost a lot of ground on the right wing. And because voter support went down in some of these regions, he's lost seats to the Liberal parties in these regions. Not that the Liberals have actually gained votes, which, if we switch over this other screen, we can see here that from last week, January 6th is when this really started, and if we look at it, the Liberals had 17.4 and 21 on January 6th, and now they're at 17.9 and 21.5. A 0.5% movement, not particularly relevant. In Saskatchewan, a 1% movement, that's relatively significant. And the reason why I say 0.5% isn't particularly relevant is because if we scroll back here, they've scored 18s, 22s, 21s. Like, it 17.9 and 21.5 is well within the fluctuation range for the Liberals in those provinces. That is not an out of nowhere result. we look at the start of the recording, or start of the model, the Conservatives only got 57% once, I believe, in Saskatchewan, and Alberta, they've been typically getting 60s, 59s. So them pulling down to 57 in Alberta and 58.7 in Saskatchewan is significant. As you also look here that since January 6th, People's Party and other have went up by 0.7 and 0.5, so 1.2 collectively in Alberta, which is most of the losses that the Conservatives have experienced there, and other went up by 0.7. The People's Party went down by 0.1 in Saskatchewan, which again is most of the losses that the Conservatives suffered there. So I definitely think that action has had a big impact on Conservatives right now. Now there is some good news. BC is still colored in a less than 40 purple color, or sorry, red color for Liberals, but it is a statistical tie right now with the Conservatives, and I expect going forward that the Conservatives will continue surging because if we go back to this other, I think this other graphic will capture this. As you can see here, the Conservatives have steadily been building support since they lost a bunch of support in October, but since October 21st, they've been steadily going up, an upward trend. It's a very, very, very small trend, but it's definitely going up, whereas the Liberals are definitely going down. They started at 34.2 and now they're down all the way down to 32.9. So they're definitely going down in BC, and the Conservatives seem to be either holding steady or going up slightly. So I expect in the next couple of weeks, if this trend continues, the Conservatives will be once again leading in BC, which again I think is to be expected. I think if an election does legitimately happen, BC will go to the Conservatives in the sense that they will get the most votes there. If you look at polling pretty much across all subject matter that has a good sample size, BC tracks more closely to Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba than it does with anywhere else in the country. Obviously, some bad sample. I think one of the reasons actually why it looks like Liberals are doing quite well in BC is we're getting a bunch of bad sample sizes. It's a very small number of samples, and a lot of small samples are all very skewed towards urban centers, which are going to look more pro-Liberal Party, whereas a lot of BC, I think it's like 2 million people, are outside of Vancouver, Victoria area, which are generally much more they're much more conservative voters or NDP voters, and I think they're being underrepresented. I think it's also a problem with Alberta polls. I don't want to bring it up because don't want to bring up the raw data because it's a bit more effort than I need to go into. But a bunch of ledger polls and some campaign polls and a couple other. Basically, pretty much every pollster will occasionally throw out a poll in Alberta where the Alberta conservatives in Alberta are getting 40%, which is just nonsense. There's no way they're getting 40% unless People's Party and other, which is Brexit, is taking up the lion's share of it. But okay, I will do this. I don't particularly like doing this because it's what's the word for it? Uh, Inconvenient, to say the least. Here we go. We're gonna switch screens here for a second. So this is the raw data for Alberta. Look at the last couple polls. We have a campaign poll where Conservatives poll 43%. Unlikely. Probably not going to happen. On January 16th, we have a ledger poll. Conservatives poll 43%. Liberals poll 31%. What was the sample size? Calgary or Edmonton? Did you ignore all of the countryside? No way. That's not happening. This ratio is not happening. At least this campaign poll here has People's Party and other as a fairly substantial, or a bit more substantial than the ledger poll, but I still think this campaign one is unlikely. This ledger one is also unlikely. Like, I think anything that's scoring less than, like, the Conservatives can get less than 50, I think. I think that's perfectly reasonable, but I think if they're in a situation where that happens, like this Angus Reid poll, I think is more tracks to how I would expect it. If the Conservatives are doing relatively poor in Alberta right now, if an election happens and they don't get above 60%, it's because People's Party and other have eroded their right-wing support, the right wing of the Conservative Party's support. It's not because the Liberals and NDP have surged. There's no way in my mind, there's zero scenarios where the Liberals are going to outperform their 2019 numbers in an Alberta election right now. Every single thing that has happened since the last election has been a middle finger to Alberta. Keystone Pipeline got cancelled and Trudeau didn't do anything. We had railway blockades which devastated farmers and oil industry in Alberta for months. We have Saudi Arabia flooding oil market and oil companies in Alberta. They didn't get any support. Gun ban. Huge amount of Albertans are opposed to this. I mean, a huge amount of Canadians in general are opposed to this, but this is particularly an insult to Alberta, Saskatchewan, because those are some of the highest rates of gun ownership, and actually BC too. And also, if you look at petitions that have been signed, those three provinces have had very high uh, anti or supported the petitions to stop the gun bans. So that's just like a few that I can name off the top of my head here. There's no way it's happening. I think we're getting a lot of bad polling in Alberta, which is not new. Alberta always gets bad polls. I don't know why. People are just not good at it, but back to the main here though. Newfoundland looks like it might be starting to trend away from the Liberals, but it's very early yet. I've expected this for a while because a lot of the same reasons why Alberta and Saskatchewan should not be very friendly to Liberals right now, I think it's reasons why Newfoundland is going to be going away from it. Basically, all the federal Liberal Party seems to care about is Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, Montreal, a certain extent Vancouver. Basically, the rest of the country they don't care about. They pay lip service to people. They pay lip service to natives. We're going to get you clean drinking water. Oh, no, we're not. We're going to actually spend all of the money we were going to do for that on foreign aid for people that's probably going to actually hurt those nations. Oops. So, I'm expecting this to go further against the Liberals in Newfoundland. I'm not sure who's going to benefit from it. I think Singh could, depending on his message. It really depends on what ends up being the sole reason why Newfoundland turns against the Liberals. And for those wondering in the background, the reason why I think it's going to turn against the Liberals is Newfoundland is in basically complete economic collapse right now. They're on the verge of bankruptcy. Their economy's in the dumpster, even though they have some of the lowest COVID case rates and some of the least restrictions going right now. Still dumpster economy. And there's really no hope going forward that their economy is going to get better. It's basically screwed. They rely on natural resources and fishing to a certain extent, but even with, like, I'll take a step back. Even before COVID, Newfoundland was on the verge of bankruptcy with a terrible economy, high unemployment rates. I mean, all of Atlantic Canada has very high unemployment rates and very high poverty rates, to be fair. But Newfoundland was up there. When I think it was like the second or high, their first or second, depending on metrics and how you count things, for poverty rates and just general unemployment, and they had fairly low incomes on average. So I'm very doubtful that after 6 years of Liberal government, where Newfoundland has not really gotten any bones, I think that's going to turn them against it. I don't know who's going to capitalize on it though. There's four parties that could do it: Green, NDP, Conservative, People's Party. People's Party seems to be making some ground in Newfoundland. If we switch back to these other, they're at 0.7. No, actually, never mind. They don't seem to be making any ground. They seem to be constant. Other has seemed to go up sharply, but that doesn't mean anything. Conservatives don't seem to be making any ground there. NDP a bit. Greens a bit, but again, it's a bit early to be seen. I think we're just on the what's the term for it? We're just at the start of the inflection point where the Newfoundland's turning away from the Liberals. This is my prediction. This is very early. This could be very wrong, but this is my prediction. I think Newfoundland's going to. I think the Liberals are going to get the majority of the seats of Newfoundland in the next election, but I think you'll probably see like Labrador or maybe the other St. John seat flip. I could see the NDP taking the second, both St. John seats, and maybe like the Conservatives taking Labrador, or maybe Avalon, I believe is the riding right here. I could see the Conservatives, that was the best riding. Whichever the riding the Conservatives performed best in 2019, I think they could theoretically flip that. But I think you'll still probably see 4 seats go to Liberals, but their margin's going to be a lot less. Similarly, New Brunswick here is turning very sharply in the last couple polls. This time I'm actually going to bring up the intentional or preemptively bring up the spreadsheet for it, because this is relatively hard to capture otherwise. Or I'm going to rephrase this. It's not hard to capture. My model does expect People's Party and other to be overrepresented, because the expectation is that come election time, unless the Conservatives completely flop, they're going to get a lot of the People's Party voters to flip back, or they just won't vote. It's kind of the same thing with the NDP. A lot of NDP voters in the pre-election cycle, and even during the election cycle, will say they're going to vote NDP, but they'll go to the ballot box and they'll vote Liberal, because in their particular riding, the NDP can't win, or they don't think the NDP can win, so they'd rather vote Liberal than Conservative. And I think the same thing's going to happen with the People's Party. So my model does clamp down on these numbers here in this column, this I column, but like you look at this all the way back in October, 10%. Then we got 8 from Abacus, 11 from Ledger, 10 from Main Street, 10 from Ledger, 13 from Ecos, 7 from Main Street. I mean, these are the same couple of pollsters. But we'll even have Campaign with 6 in here, and that's Ledger with another 6. So across the board, there's a lot of pollers suggesting hot. I will put an asterisk on this. This is my projection from the Atlantic box, based on provincial elections and just general electorate trends. So this column could be very wrong. So if we go back to this, that's the wrong one. This graph. What is this? Yeah, here we go. We go back to this guy. And what was I going to say? So we have People's Party at 3.3, 2, 1, and 0.7 in New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, PEI, Newfoundland. Realistically, my model could have those flipped to pretty much any province there. That is because it's hard to like when all 4 of the Atlantic provinces are pulled as one block every single time. Sometimes Angus Reid doesn't. Will pull them separately, except PEI. PEI is almost always pulled with some other province because it's so small. It's kind of like the territories are never really pulled. The territories are. I will note to anyone looking that the territory projections here are. What's the word for it? I'm trying to blanking it. They're kind of like an artificial projection. So it's the way I calculate the territories is I take the headline number from the poll. So if the poll's like 35 Liberal, 32 Conservative, 20 NDP, whatever. I then take that and I plug it into a converter that takes general election performance, like national performance, and projects it onto the smaller provinces. And by smaller provinces, I mean the territories. The same thing happens with I do the Atlantic provinces. So it takes past trends and it projects it there, among other things. It's not tested because there hasn't been an election since I developed this model, but that's how the model works so far, and I get pretty similar results to 338 Canada. And his model has been tested multiple times and is very good. So I'm reasonably confident that that is a valid way to do this. So yeah, so we'll just move on to my cursor seems to have disappeared here. Huh, that's weird. Well, we'll just do it like this. So we'll look at some of these graphs here. I've added a People's Party graph, like I've been saying I've been doing for a while. So I don't have a cursor to point at things because my cursor seems to have disappeared. Unless you can see it, but I cannot. So I'll just generally talk about them. I won't necessarily point out a lot of things. So Bloc, Green Party, NDP, no trend. It's chaos. There's just dots everywhere. You might think to yourself, hey, it looks like that cloud of Bloc dots is definitely going upwards, and it's like, maybe. The data can't tell you that. Let me rephrase this. The statistics cannot confirm or deny that. They may or may not be going up, but it's such a small growth over such a long period of time with so many outliers suggesting otherwise that it's unknowable. Interesting one here, and this is why I wish I had a cursor because I could point this. But if we look at the point here at 12, I can't point at it. You see there's this column on the bottom. It's the 12 column. It's a direct line. There's a point right there. It's like 34.4 and 12. There we go. That is January 6th. And that's when the news broke out that O'Toole wanted to kick Sloan out of the caucus. And that's the result afterwards. I don't think that's a coincidence. I don't think it is. Losing 0.6% in 4 updates after kicking out someone from your party and no other major events going on, I don't think that's a coincidence. So whether that's permanent loss or just a temporary loss, I don't know. If we look at, there's an Angus Reid poll, I don't have it to pull up for you, but Angus Reid poll recently, which showed that Aaron O'Toole's approval rating among Liberals, NDP, Green Party, Bloc, basically unchanged. His approval rating among Conservative, People's Party, Other, dropped by like 20 points. Not necessarily all to like his instead of being approved like 80-10-10 with 10 being undecided, it's like 60-20-20 now. So he definitely took a big hit. Is it a permanent hit? Remains to be seen. I think we'll have a better idea by the end of February. Right now, it's too early to tell. If it is a permanent hit, I think he just threw the election with that one move because he didn't get any support. No Liberals, NDP, Green, or Bloc really changed their opinion of him. But he got a huge hit from his own base, which is just a suicide move. I don't know why he did it. Sloan was loud. Sure, he got media attention, sure. But, like, he didn't really do anything bad. Unless you take comments that the media play out of context from him as bad, but, I mean, they do that to everybody. And I'll also be honest, I don't know anybody in Canada who even knew him. Like, he got a bunch of bad flack in the media, but none of my friends in real life know who he is unless I've told them about him or they followed the conservative leadership race. And the people who followed the conservative leadership race are conservatives. Or, like, conservatives as in they hold a party membership, or conservatives in they're probably going to vote for the conservatives the next election. So, I don't know what to tell you there. The only people who knew of him were conservatives, pretty much, or conservative voters, or potential voters. They're potential conservative voters. So I don't know who he was trying to impress with that action. It just seems nonsense to me. We look at the Liberals here. Again, I kind of wish I had a cursor. You'll see from like 0.10 onwards, except for this one outlier at 0.15 on the bottom. This graph is reporting a relatively large R-square of 0.46 and giving a downward trend. I don't think it's happening anymore. I think they have hit the floor right now around 35.9-ish. The Liberals, that is. I think they might go further down in the wake of the complete botching of the vaccine rollout with Pfizer. I believe not planning on giving any more doses until February 22nd. Moderna's really backlogged for us. We're apparently rating vaccines meant for like third world countries. So, considering that it was his literal only job, pretty much, other than give money to people who can't work right now because of the pandemic and get vaccines. Like those were his two main things, and he's pretty much fucked both of them. So I think he's gonna lose a lot of support. I think he will plateau at 33 at the least. I don't think he's going to get less votes than he did in 2019. He might not gain votes from 2019, but I don't think he's going to lose votes from 2019. I'll be very surprised, at least before the election. But maybe his vaccine botching is even worse than I'm anticipating. Maybe he could lose votes, but unlikely. People's Party, again, actually I don't even need the map pointer for this one. This is a pretty clear upward trend here. It's not the strongest in the world because we did have a few points that were going down, but as of now, it is going up. This one I think really correlates heavily to how the Conservatives are doing. The Conservatives are doing good, the People's Party is going to do bad. But in total, I think the People's Party has a chance of going up in the world because the People's Party does not overlap completely with the Conservative Party. There's some differences. The People's Party is much more libertarian, much more anti-government, if that makes sense. They want a very small government, very decentralized, very nationalistic. The Conservative Party is relatively nationalistic, ambivalent to government size, and generally prefers less government intervention. And generally, but they're what's the word for it? So, like, if the People's Party is like a 10 on libertarianism, which they're not, if we're on a scale of 10, but let's say they're like an 8. That's a better start. Let's say they're an 8 on libertarianism. Conservative Party is like 6. People's Party is like an 8 on laissez-faire economics, or even 9. Conservative Party is 6 or 7. They're about like 2 points behind on a lot of these things. So the overlap is not quite there, because a lot of people who voting People's Party previously voted for the Libertarian Party, and they wouldn't have voted for the Conservative Party. And I think you'll see a lot of people who wouldn't have voted otherwise vote People's Party. And that's why I think in the 2019 election, a lot of people saying that People's Party took votes from the Conservative Party, I don't think is entirely true. I think they might have taken... when they were polling, they were taking votes from the Conservative Party in polls, but in the actual election, I don't think it was very significant. I think the People's Party ended up getting 1.4% in the actual election. I'm expecting that they would probably be getting 0.4% of the Conservative vote. And if you look at how the votes are distributed across the country, maybe 2 or 3 seats, maybe, but a significant amount of People's Party votes were in Bernier's seat, which the Conservatives won anyways. And if they won it by a margin of like 60 points, like Bernier won in 2015, sorry, not by 60 points, it was like 40 points. Like, that doesn't mean anything. Like, the ridings in Alberta where the Conservatives win 90-10 or like whatever, who cares? That doesn't matter. This is the Conservatives' problem. They can have more votes and lose because they have the inverse problem the Democrats have in the US, in that a lot of the Conservative supporters are in the same regions, where like Liberals or NDP or Bloc. Bloc wins a huge on this. Bloc has a lot of supporters in a lot of areas. So, all right, they have very narrow majorities in a lot, or pluralities in a lot of ridings. Like, I believe Trois Rivières in 2019 election, the Bloc won by something ridiculous. It was like 0.2. It was like 2%. And when I say you might be like 2%, that's not that ridiculous. It's 2% with liberals and with like over to the Conservatives, liberals behind by like 3 points. It was a three-way race. There's a couple others in there's a couple other ridings too in Quebec that are basically three-way races between Conservatives, Liberals, Bloc, or Bloc, Liberal, NDP. I believe there's a couple like that. So what's the best way to phrase this then? If we this is gonna be difficult. Oh God, not having a mouse cursor here sucks. Well, we're not gonna get it here, I think, because I don't think I can turn on my OBS. I don't have a cursor. So I don't think I can press the button. Oh, there we go. I got a cursor again. Ah! That was really weird and annoying. What I was going to say. So Quebec here. I'm like just straight on a limb. I think anybody could win the majority of the seats in Quebec. And by anybody, I mean Liberals, Conservatives, and Bloc could all do it. I think Bloc and Liberals have the highest chance, but there's so many ridings where the seats are won by such narrow margins. It's the same thing happens in BC. NDP, Conservatives, and Liberals could all win BC. BC and Quebec are like the chaos regions. You cannot comfortably predict a lot of these regions, I think. That's okay, that's the wrong way to say it. You can project them, and you can be right most of the time, but they're the places that you're most likely going to be wrong in Canada. Anyways, I don't want to keep rambling for longer. I'll have another video probably next week, unless I don't get enough polls again, but I've had enough polls for the last 2 weeks, so hopefully that will continue. And until next time, I hope you all have a good week. If you're in the Maritimes, or Nova Scotia more particularly, there's going to be a big snowstorm tomorrow, or tonight and tomorrow, so make sure you plan appropriately. Otherwise, have a good day, everybody.